So unintegrated trauma, we know the body keeps score. The body, what doesn't get processed and integrate at the time of the trauma exposure, gets stored in the body, right?
Mhm.
So, and it can wreak all sorts of havoc on and especially chronic conditions. And so what happens in my research, I reframed that to call it unhealed bits of wisdom.
Welcome to the Angels and Awakening podcast, where we connect you with your angels, loved ones, and soul self. I'm your host and author, Julie Jancis. My journey began when I started hearing my late father before I knew he'd passed. Through my readings, membership, and Angel Reiki School, I help you awaken, heal, and master your unique spiritual gifts. If you feel called to work with me, it's your angels guiding you to discover your soul's highest purpose. Details at theangelmedium.com. Thank you, Earth Angels, for the 5-star reviews. You're entered into a drawing to win a free session. Now, let's see what messages your angels have for you today. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Angels and Awakening podcast. I'm your host and author, Julie Jancis. And friends, today we have a very special episode for you. We have Dr. Lorre on to talk about her new book, Nursing Our Healers' Hearts. It's a book about the nursing profession, but I think that we could also look at it within just all of our hearts because my husband's a teacher, and a lot of what you're saying about burnout applies to teachers as well. You say on the back of the book, the nursing profession is in crisis. I would say that for teachers too. Within a decade, the world will have just one half the number of nurses it needs. The global nursing workforce has experienced mass complex trauma secondary to the healthcare system's inadequacies and global pandemic. Traumatized and burnt out nurses are leaving their roles or their profession in unprecedented numbers. Those who remain are stretched to or beyond their capacity. While system level strategies aim to address this crisis, none of them consider nurse traumatization and its impact upon patient safety, outcomes, and the quality of care. We cannot wait for health systems to prioritize nurse safety. Nurses can and must come together as global community to heal through avoidable and unavoidable nurse-specific traumatization while partnering with healthcare leaders to usher in a new era of nursing. Wow. Dr. Lorre, thank you so much for being here on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And so beautifully did you read the back of the book blurb that I want to retain you to do the audiobook. That was
Oh,
that was beautiful. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Oh, thank you so, so much. I appreciate that. Um, Talk to us about this. I mean, this is a huge, huge, staggering number. Within a decade, the world will have just over half the number of nurses it needs. Now, I just want to put this in perspective for people. I have been going through a health challenge myself, which I finally feel like I'm getting figured out. We're in the first weeks of December here. August, September, October, November, I have not felt totally like myself. And I can't get in to see my primary without waiting 5 to 8 weeks. And I live in a huge city. I mean, Chicago is massive and our
Massive.
suburbs are huge. You cannot get in to see some of the specialists I was recommended to for a year.
Yeah.
Some of the specialists 3 to 4 months. What is happening first and foremost?
Yeah, so what is happening? And, I happen to be a nurse scholar, but I'm also a healthcare scientist. So I have looked at what's happening with primary care and the specialty care and nurses, and I've taken this kind of global look in my research. And so what we have is that we have we have very good people. excellent healers. And I talk about the healer's heart. We have, I myself at 40 years as a healing arts practitioner. So we have people who are very educated, skilled, and they're healing arts practitioners who have showed up to serve people who are experiencing a healthcare challenge. And what we find is a poorly designed system that
Mm,
oftentimes here in the United States prioritizes profits
yeah.
over the health and well-being of the patients, the professional safety and professional well-being of its employees. And over so we've had for like 50 years this kind of term called burnout syndrome from the 1970s when I still had braces on my teeth, right? And so I took a deep dive into the science and I was like, you know what, this is not trauma informed.
What does
Like
that mean, trauma informed?
so trauma informed means that we are looking at the whole person, including their trauma history, right? Which means individual traumas, like maybe if you've been in a car accident or your house has flooded or you have been displaced, and temporarily or permanently unsheltered, like any of those individual traumas. Then there's kind of the complex traumas, which might be something that you're navigating with, this mystery of why can't I? I mean, this is a trauma exposure that you're experiencing. I am unwell, unbalanced in my physical being, and I am seeking help from the system who is
Mhm,
not helping me. That's called
mhm,
system-induced trauma. And so, and then we have trauma from disasters and we have, neglect. We have the early, childhood traumas, the adverse events, the ACEs. And so all of those things, what we know and what the American Association College of Nursing tells us is that we, as nurses, are to assume that every single person on this planet, without exception, has some trauma history. We don't need to know what it is. We don't need to uncover it, right? Because that could actually be detrimental. But we do need to make that assumption. And so that's sort of how trauma-informed care comes
mhm,
into, being sensitive to that, being sensitive to how the body will store. It's called unintegrated trauma. I call it unhealed bits of wisdom that are
mm,
stored in the body that emerge when conditions are favorable for healing, right? So, unintegrated trauma, we know the body keeps score. The body, what doesn't get processed and integrate at the time of the trauma exposure, gets stored in the body, right?
mhm,
So, and it can wreak all sorts of havoc on and especially chronic conditions. And so, what happens in my research, I reframed that to call it unhealed bits of wisdom, right?
Ooh,
And
unhealed bits of
bits of
wisdom.
wisdom.
Ooh,
And when we get a cue from our external environment, I don't use the word triggered because it's a very aggressive,
and kind of triggering in and of
violent.
itself.
Yes, it's a violent word. Why would we bring that kind of language into a healing paradigm, right?
Yeah.
And so reframing all of that. And so we have unhealed bits of wisdom. Each and every one of us on this planet have unhealed bits of wisdom within us, and they will emerge not always at a convenient time, not always in a comfortable manner for healing. And so when that comes up for healing, it can be, we need support in that. It can be a bumpy ride. And really when we start looking at this through the lens of, and I'm going to get just a smidge geeky, but when we look through it through the lens of relational neuroscience, all right, so
Mhm,
looking at the science of relationships and how that affects our physiology. Well, what we find is that we are evolutionarily, genetically programmed to co-heal and co-regulate with
mhm,
one another. And so here you are and millions just like you, right? So we have patients who are going through our and we're to assume that they have a trauma history, right? Which
yeah.
which arguably well do because humanity endured a pandemic not long ago and that was a trauma to humanity. So, experienced differently by all of us. So humanity has experienced a mass trauma. And we were so eager, we understandably so, to to get back to normal, quote unquote. We need to get back to normal. We need to, and so what happened is now humanity has all of this unintegrated trauma because we didn't have, most of us didn't have, whether it was a global situation or whether it was something from our childhood or whether it was something that happened at work, like, the violence against healthcare providers
Mm,
is staggering and a
wow.
trauma of itself. We haven't even gotten into the traumas that the healthcare workers experience, right?
Right.
And so what happens is it gets stored in the body largely because we don't have the people that we perceive that we need before, during, and after the trauma to help us integrate. Or if we have people who love us, that's not to say we don't have people who love us and are showing up for us. I'm not saying that. And so this is where in my work it gets really juicy, is because that's where I bring in what we call in the sciences other ways of knowing, which
Mm,
means bringing in the angels,
mm,
bringing in guides, connecting and taking this really holistic approach
mm,
to healing.
mhm,
And so we have this so we have patients who are getting traumatized because there's not enough resources, there's not enough providers. You're waiting a year to see a specialist,
mhm.
right? And 2 years in other parts of the world of the people that I'm talking to. And now
Wow. What parts
you're
of the
in
world is that?
well, in Canada, where they have, national health care programs, not always, but
Yeah.
in some instances, it could take 2 years. I have clients over in Europe, in Italy, and it could take for a routine female procedure, it could take, upwards of 9, 12 months. Um, so,
And those are people who I imagine, because I've been going through this, have a ton of pain and
right,
need to probably have that procedure immediately. But these are
right,
people who are waiting 9, 12 months in intense pain, probably before being
right.
able to have
Yeah.
surgery.
which
Wow.
is which is a trauma. It's system induced trauma. We have language, we have science for that. And so what we have is kind of this perfect storm, and and I'm so sad that you're navigating it, but also thank you for sharing your story so
Yeah.
courageously, because it really does speak. Like, I got full body goosebumps right now. It really does speak to what's happening. So you're experiencing the situation. The
Mm,
system is traumatizing you because it can't take care of you, and you are unwell, unbalanced in your body, and you're doing everything in your power, right? As we all do, to regain. And our body is always working towards optimal well-being. It's always working towards homeostasis, and you're partnering with your body, and you're
mm,
doing all of the things. And then when you do finally get into the healthcare system, you're met with healthcare providers who are also traumatized. So we have
mm,
traumatized people trying to care for traumatized people in a broken system. And
mhm.
this is what, as what I call our healer's heart, our why for getting into the profession.
Right.
It's not, it's, being a health provider of any, getting through any of that is traumatic of itself, the way that
For
we
sure.
are educated and the rigor and also in those settings, lack of resources. And, the story just sort of proglammates out. And so now we have a broken healthcare system. We have patients who are experiencing trauma secondary to that broken system because they can't get in. They can't get, and then when they do get in, it's so short-staffed and under-resourced. And then there's the violence and the incivilities and the bullying and the near miss events and the adverse events. And so it's kind of like this pressure cooker
Mhm.
of trauma exposure. But what's happening, and this is where the gap is that we're as a culture, we're still calling it burnout. It's not
Okay.
burnout. It's
Ooh,
not burnout.
go deeper.
When Yes, let's go deeper. So I did a whole symptom cluster analysis at the symptoms, and I went down all the research rabbit holes because that's what I do for my day job. And I was like, oh my, there is considerable overlap. I mean, like, I don't have the number offhand, but like 80, 90% overlap of symptoms of burnout and trauma, either
Wow.
immediate or delayed responses to trauma.
Exciting news, friends! Our all new membership kicks off January 1st, and I couldn't be more thrilled to invite you to join us. This year, we've simplified everything with 12 powerful courses designed to help you connect with your angels, take control of your destiny, and use your intuitive gifts to transform your entire personal world, your relationship, professional successes, your healing journey. Plus, you'll get live weekly calls with me for hands on guidance and support. Bonus for members, my January course, Manifest Miracles with Aligned Co Creation, is free for you. Perfect for starting off 2025 with aligned miracles. Non members can grab one of the limited paid spots. And for those looking to start their own healing business, join the Angel Reiki School in person this April or start your journey online January 1st. You're going to learn mediumship, how to be an angel messenger, and energy healing all at once. And as a gift to everyone who listens to this podcast, on December 30th at 7 p.m. Central Time, I'm holding a free healing for you to clear out all of the energy from 2024 and really clear out what's not serving you. And then again on January 1st at noon Central Time, I'm hosting a free 2-hour workshop where you're going to learn how to invite miracles into your 2025 and make this your best year yet. If you're ready to step into a miraculous 2025, sign up for all of this and more at theangelmedium.com/events. That's theangelmedium.com/events. Or email me at julie@theangelmedium.com for more information. I can't wait to spend all of 2025 with you in the Angel membership. Love you, friends. Now back to the show. So how could you say that it's burnout when there's this 80 to 90% overlap?
Well, that's what really got me going. Exactly. And if you ever would like a job and training as a scientist, Julie,
Yeah.
that's like a perfect research question right there.
Yay. Yay.
Yeah. And so I started looking at this whole burnout syndrome and taking a look at its historical roots. And I'm like, this we didn't have trauma science in the 70s. At that point, it was thought that PTSD was limited to combat military personnel, say, right?
Mm.
And then maybe or sometime around in the 80s, it's like, well, okay, if you've been sexually assaulted, maybe we'll call that a trauma, you know? And so you start really looking at the impact, the physiological impact, the spiritual impact. I mean,
Mhm.
I went through a health condition where I was almost dying. I mean, I couldn't even sit on the side of the field to watch my children's soccer games. I had to lay down.
Wow.
And I went through 20 years of getting sicker and sicker and same thing. And I had access, I was able to get through. Well, we didn't know that our moldy house, I had toxic mold in the house, and I
Wow.
was I was being poisoned by this house. And but that uncertainty for almost 20 years of getting progressively worse and like starting to get like somewhat paralyzed and not being able to even sit upright at a soccer game and not being able to, be a mom in the ways that you want to. And so that brings in all sorts of spiritual or existential crisis too, because now everything's just sort of unraveling, right?
Mhm.
We're not well in our bodies, and it's stressful for our minds, and it's stressful on our relationships, and it brings stress into our emotional body, and then we start to question things, and our faith gets maybe a little wobbly. In my case, it deepened. Like it was part of my awakening process, which happens a lot too through extreme suffering, as you know.
Yeah.
So here we have all of these symptoms that are the same. And so I was working with nurses in my practice who were experiencing quote unquote burnout. And
Mhm.
this is like when I was researching and I was writing, getting ready to write the book. And I was like, why are all the nurses 50 years I've been around, a half of a century. That's how old I am, right? How come nothing has gotten better? Like I was so perplexed. And so I started taking a trauma-informed approach. I started leaned into polyvagal theory, which maybe you've had people talk about on your show. Oh, well, that's okay. We're gonna have to do a whole nother episode on just that. But there's a theory out there that's relatively new that it kind of gives framework and language to this differentiation between burnout
Mhm.
and and trauma. And so I started taking this trauma-informed approach using Stephen Porges's, just so in case any of your listeners are interested, and it's called polyvagal theory, and it has to do with how our autonomic nervous system, kind of our most primal system that is below our level of consciousness, kind of in the midbrain and the vagus nerve, and how the organism, in a very primal way, responds to these trauma exposures. And so we have misattributed to, oh, it's just stress. Oh, it's just burnout. Oh, nurses and physicians and patients, it's all in your head. You just need to work on your resilience, right? And so what that amounts to, and even if you look at the World Health Organization's definition of burnout, it says that it's occupational stress that is not being effectively managed. Does that sound like blaming the victim to you?
Oh, absolutely.
Because it sounded that way to me.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's like, wow, we have this, and how convenient for for-profit healthcare systems. How convenient is this narrative of, Julie, you should just do better with your self-care, and then your health will improve. Julie, you should just work on your resilience. Pat on the head. Here's a pizza party. Now,
Well,
now,
it
now
goes
go
back to
on.
a paper that I did in college. I was a history major, and
Mm,
I remember doing this paper and coming to the conclusion that our society is set up in a way where there is so much thrown at us. And this was back in 2000. I think it's even more so now. There is so much
oh,
thrown
yes.
at us that we cannot possibly keep up with it all, but it's kept that way kind of on purpose, going back to what you were saying. And I love living in a capitalistic society. I would not want to live in any other country. I love this country. Some of my
Right.
family
Same.
members were founders of this country. Um,
Beautiful.
Love it. But at the same time, we're so busy that we just cannot physically do it all. It's not possible.
Well, and your insight as a young woman writing a paper is so poignant right now. And so then when we start looking at some of these kind of geeky things, and that's my department, is to look at polyvagal theory, and then look at there's another predominant theory out there, and it's called cell danger response theory. And what that tells us is that just exactly what you observed. Okay, so 100%. If I were your professor, 100% on that paper, girl.
I think I got a 93.
All right, well, you were undergraded. So you start looking at the effect of the trauma exposure, right? Or chronic stress. Both our organisms, our human physiology, we are genetically equipped to manage short, intense, acute bursts of stress,
Mhm.
right? That's what we're designed for. That is what we have evolved for over the millennium, right? And and then we are in this society and the inputs and the amount of expectations and the all of the things, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we have very rich and complex lives, and that's beautiful.
Mhm.
When, however, when, however, the trauma exposure is so great, humanity sustained a trauma and we have not recovered
Mhm.
as a collective. Healthcare professionals have been in inordinate amount of trauma exposures that some of which we're trained to manage, And a lot of them have to do with healthcare system inadequacies, just as you're being traumatized by not being able to see a provider in a timely manner or see a
Mm.
specialist for a year. We're showing up and we want to help you, and we
Mhm.
can't either. And
Right,
so it's
right.
so it's so it's really frustrating. And and so we start going down all of these rabbit holes, and we start thinking like, wow, the mitochondria. Let's look at the mitochondria. So for every human body, there's this little organelle, and it's called the mitochondria, and it produces the energy for the whole organism. So these are every cell of your body has one. Super important. Energy production is the difference between I can't get out of bed and I'm talking to Julie today, right? Right, and being able to do our lives. And so what the latest science is showing us through Dr. Robert Naviaux's work is that the mitochondria get over this trauma exposure, over over this chronic stress. First, they get a little rigid.
Mhm.
They get a little stiff and they can't really do their jobs. Like, we all have a big workout and then we don't stretch afterwards. And then the next day we're kind of like the Tin Man until we get warmed up again.
Yep.
Right. So that happens to the energy production. But so now what's happening? What's happening for most patients, most healthcare employees, is that the stress that we have endured has been so great for so long that the mitochondria, those little organelles in each cell, are so depleted, they are now getting dysfunctional. And they literally cannot produce the energy that is required. And when that happens, it contributes to a whole host of mitochondria related chronic conditions, which are often kind of lumped in with this, oh, it's anxiety, oh, it's depression, oh, it's chronic fatigue, oh, it's IBS, oh, it's any of the itises, right? Which may be true. I'm not saying that that's not true. But what I'm saying is we need to look beyond that narrative and like, well, what is the trauma history?
Mhm.
What's we don't even have a tool, an instrument to assess unintegrated trauma. And the tool that we have to assess the most widely used one, the ACEs Adverse Childhood Events tool. Um, I myself, and I'll share this as courageously as you shared your challenge. I myself have recovered from severe PTSD to the point that my limbic system in my brain got injured.
Mm.
This is kind of, pretty significant PTSD. I have, and I know it's all divinely in divine right order because I had to walk and live every bit of the book and the research to
Sure.
really be able to be in service to my profession and to, humanity, in these ways. And so I was assessed for trauma, and the instrument didn't capture the types of trauma that I had endured.
Mm.
They were very, are you a combat military person? Were you molested as a child? And those are all legitimate, very, very sad and unfortunate things. But I had a lot of other sad and unfortunate things that weren't captured by the tool. And so I got misdiagnosed
Wow.
over and over and over and over again. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until recent years in the last decade, I'm a very mature woman now, in the last decade that we got the right diagnosis. We got out of the moldy house and a full recovery. I'm in post-traumatic growth right now, and now I can't unsee it,
Mhm.
right? I can't unsee this. And so I decided to self-fund this research because I didn't want there to be any grant bias or
Yeah.
any publication bias because there's, I mean, it exists and
Right.
and and there's editorial bias, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of got on this mission, and this is where my angels and my spiritual team and my dharma and my life purpose, and as I understand it in this form at this time, it's like this is my calling. And
Mhm.
I started, doing all the things that I've been trained to do, only with a much
Well,
different purpose, you
yeah.
know?
And let's go into that piece because what have you found is the solution to nursing our healers' hearts? But for anybody who has dealt with trauma, healing the traumatized heart.
Yeah, the traumatized heart, the healer's heart, the unhealed bits of wisdom, as though we're having a cup of tea. It's not a textbook. People think, oh, you're a professor and a scientist. It must be a textbook. No, this is like me coming to you with my healer's heart into your living room, and as though you and I are chatting right now. And so I have a 4-step process and over 100 practices in this book. The introduction is nurse specific. And the last
So,
chapter is nurse specific, but everything else in between is really for everyone.
so do you have a tool that kind of helps people integrate and start to work with this trauma to heal the traumatized heart?
Yeah, the traumatized heart and the traumatized body, it's really, I call
Yeah.
it the body mind essence, which captures the totality of the ancestral suffering that gets
Yeah.
passed down through lineages and so forth. And so while I have over 100 practices in the book, I have sort of a big framework and then a small practice. And so I'll give you the big picture and then I'll give you a small, like, what can I do today in 30 seconds to help myself?
Perfect.
Beautiful. So in the big picture, we have to reframe. We have to reframe, and this is my 4-step process, what self-care is. All
Mhm.
right. So we all know that we need to sleep and hydrate and exercise and be in healthy relationships and take good care of our resources. And, all of the things that we need, we already know. Kind of, we'll call those the wellness domains, right?
Mhm.
And so most people start there. I'm sure you're doing all of those things as you're navigating your own thing, as I did when I was navigating my health challenge, right? I'm doing
Yeah.
all of the things. I'm eating clean, yada, yada, yada. But what we're doing is we're taking those self-caring practices and they're going on top of a nervous system that is maybe and probably dysregulated much of the time because of this underlying trauma component, this unintegrated trauma, or what I call the unhealed bits of wisdom. And so before and underpinning, I think of it as building a house. You want your house built on a sturdy foundation, with good rebar and concrete and all of the right things so that your house is structured, is strong. And so this is where there's the formula goes like this. There's 3 A's, 1 B, and that brings us to 3 R's. So let me unpack that. The 3 A's are the foundation of your health, your house. And we start with the autonomic nervous system and the vagus nerve, our most primal system that innervates every cell in our body practically, right?
Where are those systems?
All of your body systems. So the
Okay.
autonomic nervous system, it is a very, it's primal and also complex, but it innervates all of our organs, all of
Okay.
our body. So nervous system, endocrine system, muscle system, it is all, we're whole human beings. We're inseparable from the systems within our bodies. We just separate them for the purpose of conversation and
Sure.
diagnostics, right? Right. And so the 3 A's really are how we start taking care of our autonomic nervous system and we start attending to whatever our trauma history might be. And I'm not suggesting we go back and we do revisionist history. We do not go back and relive traumas. We do not go back and write them all down and journal them. We do not do that because that will overwhelm the system. Right. We know that these unhealed bits are residing in them, and we trust that in divine right order, they will emerge for healing in a way that we have the tools and the support that we need to do that healing, right? So
Mhm.
so don't try and like don't be Lorre. Don't be
Mhm.
Lorre who said, bring it on. I'm going to write down every trauma I ever had in my journal. And I set myself through myself. I didn't even get to age 9. And I was
Yeah.
like, I dysregulated for 2 weeks. So do not be Lorre when
Yeah.
when Lorre was doing the research, you know.
Well,
So
let's just pause on that because I have felt that for a lot of time. And the way that I do, um, inner child work is much
Yes.
different from what I've seen in any other book out there. Because what the angels always show me is that taking people back into that trauma, exactly what you just said, just total flare up within the body, the mind, the energy field.
Yeah.
And so there's a way to do inner child work. I have a course in my membership where I walk people through this,
Beautiful.
but you don't have to relive it. And I think that this is a thing that's really not being spoken enough
Yeah,
about within the spiritual
I
community,
agree.
because people talk so much about this shadow work and then inner child work. And there's a lot of different components that can take you back into the depths of kind of this darkness in our lives. But to me, that has never worked for me.
Well, and it doesn't work for most. So thank you. And I got similar counsel from my own angels. And I had to live that.
Mhm.
And because I, sometimes I'm not a great listener. I'm a much better listener now than I was in my 30s, but sometimes I'm still not a great listener. And I experienced a lesson as a result of not being a great listener. And this was one of those lessons for me. It was like,
Mhm.
this isn't necessary. And I'm like, nope, I'm doing all this research, I'm all in my sciencey brain, and I'm like, I'm gonna heal it all this afternoon, and that's just not how it works. And so the three A's are the gentle way of getting in, and you're probably already doing this in your own beautiful course, which I took a peek at, and I'm just so, I mean, I got full body chills. What you are doing, Julie, is is just fabulous. And so
Thank you.
the three A's are first becoming aware that you have an autonomic nervous system, that you have a vagus nerve, and be
Mm,
aware that you probably have a trauma history. And if you have been feeling burned out, like teachers, like lawyers,
mm,
anyone who is what I call a helping professional, we're
mhm,
all kind of in these broken systems, struggling in very similar ways from the lens of our physiology, through the
mhm,
lens of trauma, through the lens of cell danger response theory, through the lens of these kind of related chronic conditions. So the first day is to become aware of how it is feeling in your body, being aware that you have this, like becoming aware of polyvagal theory, and seeing and observing and getting acquainted with your body, your mind, your essence, your spirit, in this sort of, through this lens. You're like, I have been through a lot. You have been through a lot. We all have been through a lot. And in our contemporary society, it's like, yeah, and so what's next? There's
mhm,
no pause to process. There's no time to integrate.
mhm.
Mental health resources are still it's so much better than when I was coming up, but still such stigma. And
Yeah.
many healthcare professionals won't go because we're afraid of losing our jobs, right?
Wow.
The
Wow.
stigma still persists. Traction and progress has been made. I want to acknowledge the progress that has been made, but about 30% of the nurses that I've surveyed will not get mental health for fear of judgment, stigma, or losing their job. So
That's
we need to
awesome.
become more aware. And then the second A is attending to our nervous system.
Mm,
Depending upon where you are, there's three circuits and four hybrids, and we can't unpack all of that in the time that we have, but I'm
sure.
happy to come back and we can unpack it if it's something that resonates with your beautiful community, because whom I love already, right? And
Yay.
yay. So learning to assess, kind of assess, where am I in my nervous system today? When I say nervous system, I'm talking autonomic nervous system. It's a whole
Mhm,
bunch of too many words. So nervous system, vagus nerve is what I'm talking about. So where am I in this moment? I just had this stressful encounter, or I just had an argument with my partner, or I've got this very stressful situation at work. And I'm feeling some kind of way in my body about it, but I don't have the words and I don't have the tools to know what it is or how to navigate it. All right, that's the
right.
attending. So we have awareness, attending,
Yep.
and then there's the third A, and this is all nervous system support, is the alignment. And this
Mhm.
is a big part of what you're doing, I know, in your work, I can see it and feel it from here, is that, finding that congruence between our inner reality and our external world. Sometimes our external world is a mirror
Yeah.
inward to guide us as to where an unhealed bit might be kind of reverberating, might be liberating itself from the body, so that we can transmute and heal that, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes our inner reality gives us clues about our external world. So like, oh, maybe I'm in a relationship that's not healthy for me. This relationship isn't feeling good. And so sometimes, so it's this, harmonizing our inner and outer worlds really, and getting them to be in alignment. So the three A's are kind of the inside work:
Yeah.
the awareness, the attending, the alignment. That's the core of the practice. And then the next piece of that is the B, which is for balance. And that's all of the self-care things we already know. We don't need to unpack that because we all know and live it, right?
Sure.
We know what to do. The challenge is that we're putting what we know how to do on a dysregulated or unintegrated trauma. And
Mhm.
there, and so we aren't progressing. We aren't moving forward. The symptoms aren't resolving.
Friends, I'm pausing for 30 seconds because I love, love, love connecting with you and I want to connect with you more. Got a question? Let me answer it for you on the podcast. The link to submit your questions is in the show notes. Also, we need your angel stories. Share your angel stories at theangelmedium.com/contact. And last but not least, leave a 5-star review and you could win a free 20-minute session. Last year, I did 56 free readings for review winners. All links are in the show notes. Thank you for listening. Now, back to the show. Or looking at it too from a different mindset. I came to
Yes,
the realization yesterday. Um, we don't have time to go into it, I know, but like I struggle with PMDD and cysts, in my ovaries
yes,
and that female area, and endometriosis and pelvic floor weakness and vocal weakness as well that can give me pain. And what I found is that it's all connected. That's the
yeah,
big aha moment, that I have a very
yes,
weak core.
beautiful.
The breath work needs to go all the way down to the pelvic floor. There's a lot to this, but the aha moment that I had yesterday was going back to being a child in PE, and I would think to myself, what's the least amount of work I can do in PE, right? Like, I don't want to have to do this. I just want to be able to read my books, do what I want to do. I don't want to have to work out. But it was the wrong way of looking at it. What's the least I can do? Instead, looking at it as the body needs to be strong so that my voice can be strong to speak, and just so that I can have this core within me to be able to live, especially getting into my older years, 40s here. Um yeah, so that balance, I'm finding different mindset shifts come up a lot
Right.
lately.
Yeah, and the alignment too. It's like,
Yeah.
and maybe 12-year-old Julie at that time, maybe all of her female parts as they were developing, it might have been your body's wisdom, right? It might
Mhm.
have been your body's wisdom in that moment that, you know what, there's some areas of my femaleness that
Yeah.
needs to be better supported, and those resources weren't available. And so that could have been your body's wisdom, but then it becomes a narrative. And that's, I think, what you're
Mhm.
speaking to. It becomes a
Yes.
belief that,
Mhm.
oh, well, I should this or I shouldn't that, instead of
Mhm.
this really compassionate, tender way, as though we nurture our inner children, right? As though we
Yeah.
nurture a newborn kitten, or our newborn family members, right? With that degree of nurturance, saying, you know what, I really had a hard time in PE when I was growing up. And
Yeah.
I'm curious about how that's affecting my today, you know, perspective, my today
Sure.
healthcare, symptoms or whatever, and holding that in such reverence and such compassion as I know you are doing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's beautiful to see, you be so attuned in those ways. And I know you're sharing that with your beautiful community. And I'm just here for all of that.
Oh,
So I
thank
don't know if
you.
you want to hear
Yes.
about the last part of this, of the
Yes.
three
Yes. We
R's.
got the
Okay.
three A's plus the B, and give us the last bit.
Because the three R's are the good part. We don't want
Yes.
to leave you without a so-called happy ending. Using that term very loosely, very family friendly use of that word. So the three R's are first and foremost, and the most important thing for our nervous system and those mitochondria that are producing all of the energy for us, right? We get regulated in our nervous system.
Mm,
That's the first R. And I tell you, and I know you know this because you're working with people as I am, is that when people are dysregulated in their nervous system, healing is not as accessible.
yeah.
It just isn't. And so the first and foremost thing is to get regulated in our nervous system, which is the output. This is what comes of the three A's and the B. If you
Yeah.
engage in the three A's and the B, you will get regulated in your nervous system. You will get a sense of reconnection within yourself because you're dropping in every day with yourself. You're showing up for yourself in a very intimate, personal way that our society does not support. And it doesn't have to be a 2-hour thing.
Sure.
It can be
Sure.
a 5-minute,
Absolutely.
check-in sort of thing, with your morning cup of hot whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and so you get a sense of connection, and there's a whole lot of scientific reasons why we feel disconnected within, which we won't unpack all of that today. But we do feel a sense of disconnectedness within, and that translates to a sense of disconnectedness in our outer world. So you could be in your family and your friends, your BFF friend group, right? You could be with your tribe and still feel utterly alone,
Yeah.
right? Because there's just, and so that connectedness, that sense of connectedness. So we have the first R is regulated in our nervous system. The second R is reconnected within and with others. And then the third R is restoration of our healer's heart, which is our
Mm,
why for doing what matters most in our life. Like, in our deepest layers, our deepest truth, and reconnecting with that, because that sort of gets obliterated through
yeah.
the trauma experience, and especially if the trauma isn't fully healed. So
Yeah.
that's all of the teachings in the book, and practices to go along with each step of the journey, so that you're not alone, you know.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, Dr. Lorre, you are so amazing. Your book, Nursing Our Healer's Heart, is just fantastic. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad that you took on this work as a scientist yourself. You are just so incredible. We are going to put your website in the show notes
Thank
along with
you.
your book and where everybody can find your book. I'm just so grateful. Thank you so, so much for being on the show.
And thank you, Julie, most sincerely, for the important work you're doing. I mean, I can feel you from across the country, and it is beautiful. So I am just so happy to be here, and thank you. Thank you for all the way you are showing up for your community. It's really, y'all are so blessed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If this podcast aligns with you and you feel called to work with me, thank you. Your support keeps this Angel podcast alive. Here are 3 ways to work with me. Book a session with me to hear directly from your angels and loved ones. Or my angel membership helps you connect with your angels, embrace your purpose, and build unshakable confidence. Like learning to read or ride a bike, you're going to gain skills that last forever, knowing who you are, why you're here, and direction that lasts a lifetime. Or my Angel Reiki School offers certification in mediumship, energy healing, and angel messaging, while showing you how to master your gifts and start a successful spiritual business. Now, I want you to pause, tune in, connect with your angels, maybe take a deep breath and ask them, How can I serve as an earth angel today? What guidance do you have for me right now? How will you let me know you're near? And allow your angels to support you all day. Friends, I'll see you at the Angels and Awakening podcast here every Monday and Thursday. And thank you for listening. You're my angel.